Hello and welcome to the Aussie Football Passport, your one-stop pod for updates on your favourite Aussie men and women who are playing their club careers abroad. I'm your host, Alex, and guess what? We have some world champions to talk about, thanks in particular to a Matildas goal, no less. Speaking of goals, it was a great week for our Aussies in front of goal, and I can't wait to update you on all of that. That plus there are also some last-minute transfers as the transfer window closes, including a couple of the next generation of Matildas, an injury return for a current Matilda, some red mist for a Socceroo, along with the usual goals, assists, and clean sheets from our Aussies abroad. Let's start with the headlines in just a second. It's the headlines, and let's kick it off with some transfer news, in particular with a couple of moves for the next generation of the hopeful Matildas, let's call them. And the first one is Annalise Rasmussen, who has joined Juventus. Yes, that's right, Juventus, on a deal until the end of the 2027-2028 season. She'll be the first Australian woman to play for the club, but the fourth in total, with James Troisi, Jess Van Straten, and Max Fieri having played for the men's team. Rasmussen was level with Holly McNamara in the race for the Golden Boot in the A-League Women, having scored 11 goals in 14 games for the Central Coast Mariners. She's yet another youth academy product from the club who has produced so many national team stars over the years despite operating on a shoestring budget. And we can't wait to see what Annalise does in the famous black and white of Juventus. Now to Alana Murphy, who has moved from SC Sand in the German second division to Nottingham Forest in the English second division. She has signed a contract until June 2027. She'll now face up against Caitlin Torpey, who recently joined Newcastle, who are coached by Aussie Tanya Oxby. Now to a transfer that just happened before I've recorded this episode, and it's Leah Varley, who's secured an immediate transfer to FC Nuremberg in the German First Division Bundesliga. It's for a significant undisclosed fee, and she departs Brisbane Roar. Now to the men's, where Kai Truan's move to New York City FC in the MLS was confirmed not long after last week's show, which I did put in there as a rumour initially. He signed a contract with the club until the 2028-2029 season with an option for a further year. Melbourne City and New York City are sister clubs, so the transfer fee has not been disclosed. Now to the Yengi brothers, and it has finally been confirmed that they will now meet up in Japan with their moves being finalised. Teti is heading to Machida Zelvia and Kusuni to Cerezo Osaka, as I mentioned in last week's rumour mill. Both moves are initially on loan until 30 June this year. There is an option to buy in both of those deals, I do believe. Now, the Aussie contingent at QPR is up to 4 after the club has added 18-year-old Christian Pulela to its development squad. He joins from Perth Glory and is a left back, one for the future perhaps, and it seems to be a path well trodden with, of course, Daniel Benny and Jalen Pearman both joining from Perth Glory. So all the best to Christian, and no doubt we'll see him in the first team very soon. Ashley Maynard Brewer has joined Dundee United from Charlton Athletic on an initial 6-month deal as he chases game time. He made only one appearance for Charlton Athletic in League One. He will join fellow Aussies Zach Sapsford and Ryan Strain at Dundee United. Mo Toure has joined Norwich City on a 4.5-year contract with the option for a further year. He departs Randers having scored 12 goals and providing 9 assists across 48 appearances. It means we have yet another Aussie in the Championship. A-League 2.0, anyone? Now, here's a left field one. Hibs have signed Ante Suto from Slaven Benlopo in the Croatian top division. Ante is eligible to represent Croatia and Australia due to his ancestry. He's a versatile forward who can play on either flank or through the middle, and has signed a 2.5-year contract with the club. Will Martin Boyle and Jack Iredale get in his ear to represent the green and gold? Only time will tell. And will he pop up on Tony Popovich's scouting radar? One to keep an eye on, no doubt. Now, to the rumour mill, it has wound down a fair bit considering that the transfer window is now shut in most of the top European leagues. However, it's still open in a couple of other leagues around the world, including the A-League. It is believed that Jacob Farrell is on his way back to Australia in the hope of getting some minutes after an injury-ravaged time at Portsmouth. It's believed that it will be a loan move for the rest of the season. Which club he ends up at is unknown at this stage, but I'll bring that to you once the news breaks, and that's being reported in several outlets over in the UK. A last-minute deal that is being pushed for is Heracles Alamelo's move for Reece Bozanovsky. The Perth Glory player has attracted the interest of Ernest Faber, the coach of Heracles Alamelo, after missing out on Adelaide defender Panagiotis Kikianis. If he does join it, he will have a fellow Aussie in the form of Adam Hrustic at the club to help him settle in there into the Netherlands. And in even better news, there is, in fact, no injuries to bring you. So how good is that? Absolutely love that. Anyway, let's move on to the weekly wrap in just a moment. Now, let's start with the FIFA Champions Cup, which is essentially the Women's Club World Cup. And it started in midweek last week with Arsenal defeating FAR Rabat, a Moroccan side, 6-0 in the first ever FIFA Women's Champions Cup semi-final to advance to the final on the weekend. Caitlin Ford was substituted on to the field at halftime and provided the assist for the final goal of the game. Steph Catley and Kyra Cooney-Cross were unused substitute. Now, let's talk about the final because, as I alluded to earlier in the show, we have some world champion Matildas because Arsenal defeated Corinthians 3-2 in extra time to become the first ever winners of the FIFA Women's Champions Cup. Steph Catley started and played the whole game for Arsenal. Kyra Cooney-Cross was an unused substitute. And you may notice that I've left someone out of that. So that's a little hint for later on the show. So hopefully you stick around to find out who our Women's Player of the Week is, but I reckon you may well know. Anyway, let's turn our attention to WSL action in England, where Tottenham had to come from behind to defeat West Ham 2-1. Claire Hunt started and played the full game, while Charlie Grant remains unavailable due to injury for Spurs. Katrina Gorry played the full game in midfield for the Hammers. Claire Wheeler started and played the full game in midfield for Everton as they beat Aston Villa 2-1. It was an important 3 points for the Toffees as they look to secure their WSL status for next season. The London City Lionesses defeated Brighton and Hove Albion 2-1. A recurring theme with these WSL games. Charlie's Rule started and played 70 minutes for Brighton, whilst Alana Kennedy was a second half substitute for the Lionesses, playing 9 minutes. Manchester City took a big step towards winning the WSL with an emphatic 5-1 victory over Chelsea. It was a statement victory for City. However, you'll have to excuse me because it's not the headline I'm interested in. I'm much more interested in a second half substitute for City. Yes, it was Mary Fowler. She made her return to the pitch in the 76th minute after rupturing her ACL last April. Interestingly, she came on and played as a centre forward. And it's a role that we've seen her play for the Matildas before. She's much more accustomed to playing on either flank or in behind a striker, but it is something to take note of and will give Joe Montemurro something to think about rotating those forward players in the Asian Cup. Oh yeah, and there were 2 Aussies playing for Chelsea, weren't there? Ellie Carpenter started and played the full game, while Sam Kerr was a second half substitute, getting 41 minutes. Rounding out the action in the English Women's Second Division, Caitlin Torpey started at left back, playing 62 minutes in Newcastle's 1-1 draw with Ipswich Town, who are bottom of the table, and puts a little bit of a dent in Newcastle's momentum as they push for promotion. Now, let's head to France, where Clara Uraou played 65 minutes in midfield for Fleurier in their 1-0 win over Montpellier. Kaya Simon played 11 minutes of Dijon's 3-0 win over Strasbourg. Now to Italy, where Winona Heatley started and played the full match for Roma as they kept a clean sheet and defeated city rivals Lazio 3-0 in the Coppa Italia semi-finals in midweek. She then backed it up at the weekend as a second-half substitute for Roma, playing 33 minutes in their entertaining 3-3 draw with Parma. Alex Shudiak started and played the full game in midfield for Como in their 1-1 draw with Lazio. We just can't seem to get rid of Lazio in this week's show. Sassuolo suffered a heavy defeat by Juventus. The final score was 4-0. Jessica Nash started and played the full game, while Jacinta Galabadaracci started and played 56 minutes for Sassuolo. Now, let's talk about the men in the championship. Callum Elder started and played a full game, providing an assist for Derby County's first goal as they beat Bristol City 5-0. Riley McGree provided the assist for the winning and only goal as Middlesbrough beat Norwich City 1-0. The midfielder started and played an hour in a result that moved his side level on points with Coventry City in first place in the championship. Sam Silvera was on the bench but did not make it onto the pitch, and there's been a couple of transfers in those wide positions. That means Sam Silvera's position in the side is not guaranteed, and minutes might be a little bit harder for Sam to come by, but let's hope that is not the case and he wins his spot back. Now to a game that I alluded to earlier in the show regarding the Red Mist. No, it wasn't Cameron Burgess, but he played a massive part in Swansea City's clean sheet, playing a full game as they defeated Watford 2-0. Now to the man that suffered the red mist. It was Nestor Irankunda, who came on in the 76th minute for Watford before being sent off for a bit of a shove on one of the Swansea City players who, let's be honest, made the most of it, but shouldn't be shoving fellow players like that, Nestor. And we know he does have a bit of a temper. Hopefully he can rein it in. We did see some lovely scenes as the referee was making his decision. Cameron Burgess came over to calm down Nestor in a sign of that Socceroo's brotherhood. Lewis Miller played the second half for Blackburn Rovers in a 1-0 loss to high-flying Hull City. Adrian Segicic started and played 75 minutes for Portsmouth as they defeated West Bromwich Albion 3-0. There was no Jacob Farrell on the bench as that loan move looks to be playing out. And of course, Thomas Waddingham and Hayden Matthews are both continuing their recovery from their respective injuries. Daniel Benny started and played 67 minutes of QPR's shock 2-1 victory over table-topping Coventry City. And, of course, that result helped Riley McGree and Sam Silvera's Middlesbrough out massively. So a little bit of an Aussie helping hand, let's say. Aussie teammate Keely Adamson was on the bench but did not see any minutes for QPR in that game. Now let's drop down a division to League One, where we had midweek and weekend games. Joe Gauci started and played the full game between the sticks for Port Vale in their 3-1 loss to Exeter City in the midweek game. He then backed it up with a big performance in Port Vale's 1-0 win against Leyton Orient at the weekend. He made 2 big saves, helping his side to a clean sheet. Gauci has now played 3 of the last 4 games after a spell on the bench before that, and we love to see it. Rafael Borges Rodriguez came on in the 62nd minute for Wigan Athletic in their 2-0 loss to Wycombe Wanderers in midweek. Torres Francois was not in the matchday squad for that one. He backed it up as a late sub for Wigan. That's Rafael Borges Rodriguez in their 1-0 loss to Lincoln City. Torres Francois was not in the matchday squad for a 3rd game in a row, which is a little bit of a worry. There's no news on an injury to Tyree, so not too sure if there is an issue off the field there or there is an injury that has not been reported. We'll find that out for you in next week's show. Caleb Watts started and played 72 minutes for Plymouth Argyle in their 1-1 draw with Mansfield Town in midweek. He then backed it up with his side's only goal in their 2-1 loss to Stockport at the weekend. He started and was substituted at half-time. Now let's head to Scotland, where Martin Boyle started and played 66 minutes for Hibs as they drew 0-0 with Rangers. Jack Iredale started and played the full game for Hibs at centre-back. Ryan Strain started and played a full game for Dundee United as they lost 3-0 to table-topping Hearts, who are still without Cameron Devlin. Sax Sapsford joined the action as a half-time substitute, whilst Ashley Maynard Brewer made his debut in goal, starting and playing the full game. Ryan McGowan played a full game for Livingston in a 2-0 loss to Motherwell. In opposition, Oscar Priestman started and played the full game in midfield, whilst Johnny Katrumba started and played 85 minutes at left back, and Apostolos Stamatolopoulos was an unused substitute. Now to Italy, where Alessandro Ciccardi started and played a full game in Parma's 4-1 loss to Juventus. Despite the difficult result, Ciccardi was the instigator for Parma's only goal of the match. He was in an unusually high position on the pitch considering he is a centre-back, inside the left channel of Juve's penalty area, where he drilled a dangerous ball across the face of goal, which was turned into his own net by Andrea Cambiaso. Now to Germany, where Jackson Irvine was substituted on in the 76th minute of St. Pauli's crucial come-from-behind draw with RB Leipzig, which ended 1-1 in midweek. The result meant St. Pauli are 4 points away from getting out of the relegation spots in the Bundesliga. He was then substituted on in the 71st minute of St. Pauli's 2-1 loss to Augsburg at the weekend in a far from ideal result for his side, meaning they stay in those relegation positions. Now to Spain, where Matt Ryan started and played a full game for Levante as they drew 0-0 with Atletico Madrid. In a real David vs Goliath battle, it took a masterclass of goalkeeping from the Socceroo's captain to keep out an Atleti attack that includes the likes of Julian Alvarez, Alexander Soloff, Thiago Almada and Nico Gonzalez. In fact, he made 4 saves to preserve that clean sheet. Now to Croatia, where Fran Karasic started and played all of Osijek's 1-0 win against Rijeka, which helped steer them clear of the relegation zone. Now to Netherlands, where Jordan Boss played an hour of Feyenoord's 2-1 loss to Real Betis in midweek Europa League action. The result means that Feyenoord have been eliminated from the tournament, unfortunately. He then backed up by starting and playing a full game as his side Feyenoord, this time losing 3-0 to PSV Eindhoven as they extended their lead at the top of the table, and it is looking increasingly likely that they will take out the Eredivisie for this season. Aron Hustic opened the scoring with a lovely goal. He brought the ball down expertly with his chest before rifling home a volley. The goal helped his side Heracles Alamello to an important 2-1 victory over Fortuna Sittard. The midfielder started and played 84 minutes in that one. Max Ballard started and played 83 minutes in midfield for NAC Breda as they drew 2-2 with Twente. To Austria, where Marco Tilio started and played the first half of Rapid Wien's heavy 3-0 loss to Ried. Now to Poland, where Denny Juric made his long-awaited return, going on to score Wisła Płock's second goal and winning goal, might I add, in a 2-1 win against Raków Częstochowa. He started and played 76 minutes. Now to Cyprus, where Miloš Degenek started and played a full game for Apoel as they defeated their crosstown rivals Olympiakos Nicosia 2-0. Rounding out the men's action for this week in Czechia, where Garan Qual was substituted on in the 66th minute of Sparta Prague's 3-0 win against Dukla Prague in the local derby. All right, that is it for the weekly wrap. Next up is Players of the Week, and I'll wrap up this week's episode of the Aussie Football Passport. Players of the Week time, and you've probably guessed it, it is Caitlin Ford who is our Women's Player of the Week. Let me tell you why. She was introduced in the second half of the FIFA Champions Cup game for Arsenal against Corinthians in the 64th minute to be precise, and she went on to have the desired effect of a substitute on the game. She scored the match winner in the 104th minute, which falls in extra time, of course, to win her side the World Championship. Our girls, of course, Caitlin Ford, Seth Catley and Kyra Cooney-Cross became the first world champions at club level for Australian football players. How good. So it was, of course, a no-brainer when it came to awarding Caitlin this week's Women's Player of the Week award. Now to our men's player of the week. It is Alex Robertson, who scored a brace for Cardiff City in a 2-2 draw with Burton Albion. The midfielder scored twice after halftime to put Cardiff in the lead before being substituted in the 74th minute of the game at the weekend. And it's fair to say his substitution may or may not have affected the result there, as Burton Albion came back to level that game up. I should update you, of course, he did play in midweek as well. He played the first half of Cardiff City's 4-0 win against Barnsley. A great week for the midfielder, of course, and hopefully it means he will link up with the Socceroo squad in March as he looks to confirm his allegiances to the green and gold. All right, that is it for another week of the Aussie Football Passport. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you can, please share the podcast to anyone who wants to keep tabs on who is in the running for the Matildas and Socceroo squads, particularly with that Women's Asian Cup coming up next month and the Socceroo's Men's World Cup coming up in June. It'll, of course, help the show get found more and get the algorithm working in the background, which is exactly what we want it to do. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.